Rose Wilson, 86 years old.
Rose, where were you born?
I was born in Deering, in East Deering. My parents actually lived in East Deering, but I was born down here in West Deering at my grandmother's house.
How many siblings?
I have one brother.
Older, younger?
Younger, 4 years younger than I am.
What did your parents do for work?
My mother didn't work out of the home very much. She was a housewife, and my father did logging. He did manual work, and then he worked at the Menandoc paper mill for quite a few years after that.
Your maiden name, Rose?
Davy, D-A-V-Y.
When you were growing up, what kind of chores did your parents have you do?
Oh, not a lot. I pick up after myself or try to, and do little things around the house. When I got to be a teenager, I worked off and on at different jobs. I had I had a squirrel I put in a cage and had him for a pet for quite a while. And I liked the animals. I'd get the rabbits out of the ground and just try to save them when the dogs would dig them up and stuff like that.
What did you do for fun?
I visited a friend over in Bennington. We moved from Deering to Bennington when I was 4, and I used to go visit her a lot and do things with her family. We'd go to the movies, and sometimes my mother would bring us also. We had fun.
Were those the movies in Hillsborough?
We would go to Hillsborough. Occasionally, my friend's mother would bring us to Manchester, and we'd go out on a Saturday night and have dinner and go to the movies down there, whatever. Yeah. We did whatever we could that was going on in town, and go to town for ice cream and things like that.
Do you remember the trains that would come through?
Oh yes, yeah. Trains came through when we first moved here. They'd come through. There was the steam engine when we first came. We'd wait for that once a day, and they went all the way to Hillsborough at that time. Turned around and came back.
Did you and your girlfriend ever go on the train?
No.
No.
I would just see them from here. They went through Bennington as well. You remember they went across the river many years ago when there was the railroad track caught fire at one time. In fact, I have a picture of that. The sparks from the train started the fire. My father's sister was Ruth Lawson, who also lived in East Deering. And you probably know Mabel Ager. She was one of the Lawsons. They had five children, I believe, and their oldest son, his name now. Their oldest son was apparently born with a heart condition. We knew he had issues, but didn't know really what it was. And he was friends of Wayne as well as, of course, I'd known all my life. And he died right after we got married. Had been to our house. We lived in Antrim then. He had been there the night before. It was on Labor Day, and the next 2 days later, his brother came and told us that he had died. It was just a terrible shock. I think his family might have known it was going to happen, but never told anybody. I don't know that for sure.
Did you go to a one-room schoolhouse?
No, I went over to Bennington School, and that was given to the town by a person by the last name of Pierce, and it was a Pierce school, still there. Nice school. It had 4 rooms, with 2 classes in each room. And I went there until I graduated from the 8th grade. There were 4 of us. And then we had a choice of going to Peterborough or Hillsborough. But we had to supply our own transportation. And I went to Peterborough, everybody else was, so that's where I went. I didn't have any choice. Antrim, we could have gotten a bus in Antrim at the time and gone there, but I would have still had to get to town. So my mother hired a bus, somebody to come and pick me up every day. It was like $2 a week or something back then. I don't remember exactly what it was.
When did you actually start working?
I worked up at where the store in Antrim is now, when I was like probably 14 or 15 for a couple of weeks on vacation. And when I was a senior, I did odd things, but nothing major. I started at the bank in Peterborough. It was Peterborough Savings Bank there. And I used to walk down from school and work after school for 2 or 3 hours a night. And there was a lady over there that would give me a ride back to Bennington, Antrim. My mother would meet me. And then after we got married, I worked until we had our first child. And then many years later, we had a mortgage with Peterborough Savings Bank, and somebody came in that I knew, and I was then, the youngest was probably 5 or 6. And I asked him if there was anything available at the bank. And he went back and he was an appraiser, it was just a routine thing they did. But he went back and told the lady that I worked for back then that I was looking for a job. So she called me up and asked me if I wanted to do school savings. They had a new program they were starting, and I was ready to go to work. The kids would be in school. So I would go from here 2 days a week. I would go from here and go to all of the Conval district. I would go to Antrim, Bennington, Hancock, and then back to Greenfield in the morning and pick up little envelopes with money for the kids that the kids would deposit. And then I would go back to the bank and count them and process them. And then the next day, that afternoon I would go to Dublin and to Temple. They were in the district. So I drive most of that day, and then we count it and process the money, I don't remember exactly how I did it, but then I had to go back and deliver all the envelopes the next day or 2 after that. So it was like 3 days of work, and I think I ended up working 5 days, but I do other things and fill in with that. And I did that for a couple of years. And then an opening came open in Antrim, and they asked me to come over there and work at that branch. And I loved just being there. I was there for a couple of years. And then I ended up going to Peterborough, and then I just kept moving around, and I stayed there like 27 years in the branch. But the banks then were merging and buying, and it got really crazy. And so I quit. I was like 57. I quit before I was 60, and so what did I do after that? I mostly not a lot. We traveled quite a bit at that time, and so here I am. Then I stayed home taking care of grandchildren for quite a while.
So how did you end up meeting Wayne?
Well, I was up to my cousins in Deering. Mabel was a Lawson then, and the first time I saw him, he was outside the window playing around and climbing a tree, and we were laughing at him and all that. And I really only kind of knew who he was. I didn't really meet him. And then he went in the service. He went in the Marines, and several years later, my father was very sick when I was a senior in high school, and in the transportation to get to Peterborough, I couldn't get over there, so I ended up going to Bennington and staying with these people for that year, the last year of high school. And my mother would pick me up for the weekend and one day during the week. And Andy Lawson, which would be Mabel's twin brother who has died now, was working for Wayne's father. All gets complicated. But I was over to Parker's, and all of a sudden, Andy and Wayne came in. And I'd never seen him before. And they had a truck. No, I'm sorry, that's not right. And Andy came. They wanted us to go for a ride. I'm trying to think if we met him once. Anyway, we still, Wayne and I still laugh about this because Gert, my friend Gert, thought Wayne was kind of cute. He was driving. She jumped in the front seat. So Andy was in the back, so here I am in the back seat with my cousin. That wasn't really, but it was funny. Anyway, we still joke about that because I said, yeah. And then he came back. Anyway, I think they came back one night. She was babysitting, and I was with her at this house, and I think just Wayne came in. I don't know. I bet I asked Wayne that story. He'd remember it better than I do. So then he kept coming back after he got out of the Marines, because he was still in the Marines when he came over there that night.
So then started your courtship?
Yes, yeah, we did. Yeah, he didn't go too far after that. And we did well.
How long did you court before you were married?
We met at Christmas, and then really he came home. He got out of the service in March, and that's when he came back and would come over all the time. And then we got married in October 15th of that year. So we didn't court too long.
When you know it's right, it's right.
And after he got out of the service, he did end up getting a job in Connecticut with a friend of his he'd been in the service with, and he went down there and lived, and then he'd come up every weekend. That was pretty tough. A lot of driving for him.
Did you live on your own with friends or mom?
I went back and lived with my parents when my father got out of the hospital and everything, and I didn't have to go to school, got a ride and all that. We got married in Antrim, and I was still working. I still kept my job at the bank, and I quit working when I had the first baby. So.
And how many children do you have?
5. And they're all over the country now. I have one in California, one in Alabama, and one in Florida, and 2 here. Linda Goyette is my daughter, too. She lives right up the road. You might know her.
So when you first got married, where did you live?
We lived in Antrim. If you're going from Antrim to Bennington, you go down that sharp hill right in town. We had an apartment over there on the right. And then Wayne worked in the Goodall Company for a while, so he could walk to work. And I had a lady from Bennington would come and pick me up and take me over. She was very good.
When did you move back to Deering?
We bought this in 1959. Absolutely thrilled with it. It didn't have that big addition on the end. It was just the little house here. Hazel McAllister was my neighbor down here. And then I got to know all the neighbors eventually around.
Did you still know people in Deering? Or was it?
No, we didn't know it well. We didn't know anybody down here.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, we met them quickly though. We had met Jerry Donovan up at Wayne's father's because he owned the farm where Platt's owned in Antrim, if you know where that is. After we got married, we were in the apartment. We had a trailer right across from where Platt's lived, and we lived in there for a couple of years too. And then we were so happy to get the house. We had a family, and it was a yard and all that good stuff.
So when you moved back to Deering in '55, the trains and the farms were still?
Yes, actually we didn't move back here for Deering till '59 because we had been in the trailer too. The train would go by. I could look out the window and we'll see the steam engine, which was nice. And then they would have it in the fall. They'd have a tourist train when the foliage was, and they had the McAllister farm was always there. That was a big one, and didn't have the old ones that Ed Corbett was talking about the other day. I never knew that there was one where Lisa lives. Lisa and Christensen. And that fire, I had come down here that one with that farm burnt. I'd never been down this way, and that was when we lived in a trailer and we drove down, and Wayne was familiar with it all because he had done a lot of traveling at poultry, delivering eggs and things all over everywhere. He knew he was better on directions than I am. But I did a lot with Marge Donovan and Hazel, and just got into with the kids growing, all being kids the same age.
Mm-hmm. Did the families in Deering get together for community events?
Most of them did. They would do. Didn't do a lot, but if we had something, we would. We had a time that we had what we called a sewing club, but the people locally here, every week or every 2 weeks, we'd get together and they'd all come to one house and we'd have cookies, make things, and then either sit and sew or crochet or something like that. We did enjoy that. It was Hazel, Muriel. Muriel was a great person. She was, and Jean. And most of them we're still here. We're losing some, but a lot of them are still around. Muriel was great. Marge would usually come. And they give you a chance to cook and have somebody come and eat it. All that. Because once I went to work, I got busy. That not because of that, but we get busier and you kind of do your own thing with your work and all too.
Did a lot of the other mothers stay home with the children?
Yeah, most of them did then, yeah.
Did they go back? Do you remember if they went back to work after, like you did, or?
Jean did some work. Jean was a nurse, Jean Feather, and she did do some work, but not. Well, of course they had the store too. They had and she worked there, so I shouldn't say that. Not till like a little later, I think they all found something to do. And I got busy, too much to do for a while.
Do you remember when the airport went in, or was
Oh,
it here?
absolutely, yeah. I was working in Antrim then, when the airport went in, and it was, the economy was really going great. We had all kinds of customers. They had many thousands of kids up there when they first opened the college, and we'd be doing checking accounts. And then they went out of Antrim. Goodell Company went out at the same time, and Crotched Mountain closed that time. They'd had a good season, and the whole town was like a ghost town in Antrim, and it was a big change. And then eventually I transferred, when I went back to the main bank in Peterborough, then I transferred to Hillsborough. Actually, I stayed at Antrim long enough that I was the manager there for a while, and then I went to Hillsborough when that opened. No, that had been opened a while before I went down, I think. And then it all got too much. That's after that was when all the mergers and everything started up.
One of my first jobs had been in banking
Where was that?
up in Hanover
Oh,
for Dartmouth Savings.
oh,
And it was just on that cusp, just before interstate banking,
yes.
before bank cards,
Oh, God, I remember that. Oh,
before credit cards were
Yeah.
so available.
oh, yes, yeah,
And I had a little branch that I ran in Grantham.
yeah. I'm pretty familiar with that area too. I had family up there. One of my daughter, Linda, lived up there for a long time, and her kids grew up there. They're still around there a lot.
So when basically in Deering, the trains went out and the planes came in.
Yes, yeah. They came in around, I was around the 70s. Yeah, that was a drastic change, especially for Antrim, but the planes down here too. Now they've been sold. I just don't think they're going to get too much commercial stuff from what I heard, but I hope not. We used to do some crazy things. One day, Barbara, Muriel, myself, and I might have been more, but I had my youngest son, Dennis, who wasn't in school, and I think Jean had Heidi with her, and I don't remember whether Chet was with Muriel or not, but we drove, the snow was very deep, and we drove the snowmobiles from here, up to where the fire station is, to Muriel's mother's, who lives in down in Henniker, down the other side of Henniker up on a mountain, and there was a trail somewhere we could get through there. And you would go over a snowbank and with a snowmobile, and it was so deep, you'd have to jump off the snowmobile and pull it up because you couldn't get going, it gets stuck. And we drove down there and came back all in the same day. We made it home. I don't know how, but we made it home. And Muriel's mother, she knew we were coming. She had lunch for us. It was very nice. It's a good story to tell anyway. It was a good trip. I'm sure Jean would remember that.
Snowmobiles came out in the late 50s, early 60s?
We got ours in 66, I think we got our first one. Wayne just had to have one and said, what do you do with that?
Did you have your own snowmobile?
I did at the end I did, yeah. Because the little ones you get stuck with but the little ones were much better to drive than the big ones. Well, Wayne and I We went up twice around the Gaspé, up and up. We drove up to northern Maine and stayed there, and then went up once with Marge and Fritz, and the second time we went up alone. But that was kind of scary. It was okay, but it wasn't enough. Because steep mountains and some scary spots. It was a good experience. Good food. They were catering to them. They liked that business up there. They went a week at a time.
Would you all get together with a big snowmobile club and go out with?
Yeah. What we would do from here, the local stuff was nice. We would go down every Wednesday night was Tap and Cherry then, down where going to Hennett, Morse's Sporting Goods is now, where they had the restaurant down there. We would ride from here down, and it would be 20, 30, 40 of us go down there and all have a meal. They'd have whatever they had. It was something, I think everybody had the same thing. We had a good time with that. We had people from Hancock would come over and meet us and ride down with us. It'd be a huge group. My mother would come over and stay with the kids, and she'd look out the window and it was raining and we're still going. She's like, well, you're crazy. But it was a good time.
It was colder.
Colder?
Wasn't it colder? Now they have, heated mitts and boots and runners and handles.
We were pretty well equipped. Not the warmers, but we had the big snowmobile suits we buy through Livingston. We've talked to Stevie a few times, Stevie Livingston, and I gave him all my snowmobile pictures up. Of course, they're not like they used to be. And he's going to have some of them enlarged and put around that new building. I don't think he's done it yet, because I told him I wanted to see it when he gets it done. He's going to have them blown up and put up there, so I thought that was kind of nice to see.
You said that you and Wayne did some traveling after retirement?
Yes, we had a motorhome. I had a couple of them. And we'd go out west to see our son, where Dennis was out in California, and Colorado, and we went for several years. We'd go different trips out that way and see him. Didn't go out of the country other than Canada. Went up there. I have a friend up in Whitefish, Montana, and that's a beautiful country up there. Went up there and visited her several times. That same girl that was in Bennington. She got a long ways from home too. And we used to go down south. We had grandchildren down in Alabama. We'd go down there a couple times a year anyway. But after the last trip leaving California, when the pandemic was coming on, we didn't go anywhere else. For a long time.
How was that for you through the pandemic?
We didn't have any problem. It just was so different for everybody. Trying to get your food and staying home. Wayne got the COVID once, and he wasn't that sick, but he did have it, and my daughter Judy across the street got it, and I have not yet. I've gotten the vaccines. Haven't really worried too much about it lately. It seems to be better, but I just don't like, I see the planes backed up and flights delayed and all that. I don't like that. And you try to go somewhere and it gets canceled. But I've got a granddaughter out in Montana. She came home last year. I think she's going to come back in March. No, May of this year, I think. I have to keep track of this. The tourist season is coming. They're all coming to West Deeren.
Thinking back to your childhood again.
Mm-hmm.
So your dad was a Davy,
Yes,
and your mom,
a Tacy.
she was a Tacy.
Tacy. And she's the one that her parents lived up there where I told you where I was born. They were very, very poor. And she used to tell me those stories many times. But they were, my grandmother had 2 boys and her husband died when she was young. And then she married my grandfather and they had 6 children. So they had 8 children and no money. And he worked, I remember my grandfather. He was very clever as far as trying to do things, and he would make wreaths and sell them, and he would get the kids all out picking stuff to make the wreaths with, and they worked hard as kids. And then they would, said one time they didn't have any food, and all they had was a bag of flour, and my grandmother would make brown gravy and bread, and that's all they ate for like 3 or 4 days. And then finally he went to the dump, I think she said, but made some little baskets and went around selling them. She sent the kids up and down the street, and it was tough. But she was pretty clever too. My mother she loved to make crafts and make everything she could think of, stuff like that. She'd get on some odd things.
When you were growing up, did you have running water or
No,
indoor plumbing? Or?
we never had electricity until I was like 10, and that was over in Bennington. And we were so excited. We finally got all the appliances in the house and electricity, and we just didn't have power to put them on. We had the light fixtures up there, but we no power. So excited when it finally came on. And we had a wood stove, and that was it. And that was cold too in the morning.
So your mom had to use a wood stove. Did you have running water inside?
Eventually we did. We had a pump to begin with. My mother loved her wood stove. She'd rather cook in that. She did have an electric one, she got old later. But she would love the wood stove. She could handle it. And my father liked to eat baked beans. He wanted them every day of the week.
Do you still like baked beans? Did you ever?
Oh, I like them. Yeah, I don't like them that well, but I like them. Once in a while. I cook them in the crock pot now. Things have changed.
How did your mom used to cook them?
In the oven, in the wood stove. Yeah. But she did have an electric stove. I don't know when that came. I don't remember. I was gone, I guess.
Do you remember if it was cold in the winter? Did you just heat with wood?
I remember coming downstairs and they would have the fire going, and I'd get behind the wood stove. It was a big one that stood out. I'd get behind there and get dressed behind the stove, so it was cold. But it's just, you got to do that to stay warm, and plenty of clothes and everything, plenty of blankets and all that.
Did your mom make your clothes?
No, not much. She did sew some, but she really didn't make my clothes. They were good. That we always got what we needed. Definitely, and we didn't go without. Always food, but don't tell them you didn't like what they had. Don't tell my father anyway. But we learned to eat everything too. And I do pretty well. There are a couple of things I don't like, but not that much.
Did you have a garden?
Oh yes, they had a big garden, yeah. And my mother would can. Yeah, potatoes, we'd have homegrown potatoes, and yeah, and then eventually they got a freezer, and he would raise pigs, and we'd have those in the freezer. Yeah, we had plenty of food.
Did he do his own salt pork?
I think he did, yes, yeah. Have that in the baked beans when he made them. Trying to think what else he had down cellar. The potatoes, I know that. And my mother would can hundreds of gallon jars of vegetables or whatever she could.
You said your dad was a logger. Did he have a team of horses? Did he work for someone?
Well, no, he just worked in the woods, cutting brush, whatever he could get. But he did have a horse at one time, and just didn't do much with it. Didn't have it for too long. But I've got pictures of it in a harness somewhere. He probably did use to pull some wood or whatever he was doing, but he wasn't really a logger. He was more of a cutting cordwood is what he would do, things like that. Yeah, but he went in the paper mill when, I don't know, don't remember exactly when. He'd been in and out a couple times. He was in years ago when he lived up in Easter, and he used to drive there, which was a terrible long drive at night, and he worked the swing shift. And then he had he had something with his back, and I'm trying to think what he had, but he had to have surgery on that that was when I was a senior in high school. And he was up to White River Junction Veterans Hospital for several months, but he was on a steel frame, and they had him strapped on it, and every 6 hours or something, they'd flip it like a sandwich. And I think it was on that for a month because whatever went wrong with his back. I don't know. He never went back to work after that. He was disabled, but I take that back. I think he went to work for a short time, but he couldn't handle it too much. So. Then he got out on disability before he died.
What war did he serve in?
World War II. He came back. He went in when he was drafted. He was 40-something, so he was drafted, and he came back when I was about 7 or 8. He was gone a couple of years. Yeah. I remember hearing the whistles blow when the war ended. Yeah, those were tough times for everybody.
How did your mom manage with 2 children and her husband and...
It was tough. It was really. We lived, at that time, my grandmother had moved, and grandfather had moved down to Bennington too. They had actually moved to Bennington before my parents did. So they were down there. I don't know who helped who. She probably helped them more than they did her, but they were both living down there too, so there were people around.
It's never occurred to me that it must have been strange most of all the adult men were gone.
They were, yeah.
It was just a community of women and children left.
Yeah, and there were we had the coupons. You couldn't get the butter. You'd have to get the margarine and then put the coloring in it. It was still it worked. And I do remember all that as a little kid. When the war was over, my brother had never seen a banana. You know, they came in they weren't around. We had enough food, but it wasn't your choices of what you wanted. Because we didn't know the difference, so, you know, as far as what you have, and I think the people in the country that had gardens and that were better off. And they used to there's certain times they'd make you have all your lights off, they'd have an air warning, and yeah. Because my brother would tell us some of the same stories over and over again, so you hear all that. But I do remember most of that. I don't even remember whether my father was home when I started school or not. I know he was when I came. I remember him coming back, but I don't remember when he left exactly. I was in first or second grade. But we never got the car. We had an old truck that they drove, an old one, I think. But after, in 41, when he got back, he wasn't at home too long, and economy was picking up, and he did buy a new car, which was nice. Everybody was excited.
What color was it?
Gray.
Gray.
My mother drove that for a long time. Yeah.
I think we're good.
Oh, God. Enough of my old stories, huh?
Love 'em.
Thank you.
Oh, God. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for
I
taking
hope-
your time.
I hope I didn't screw it up too much.